Begin today the Gemara towards the bottom of Daf Pei Beis Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom, where it says Boy Abaya. So here the Gemara is continuing a discussion from what we had in the beginning of this Pedic. The Mishnah brought a case of a person that divorced his wife, and he tells her, "You mutter to everybody, but to one person. You're not mutter to him." And the Gemara before actually had two versions of what this person said. Did he say you mutter to everyone, and then he just makes a condition, al manas. You mutter on the condition that you don't marry one person. It's one pshat. And there was a machlekes in the Mishnah. Chachamim said that the get is possible, and Rabbi Eliezer says that the get is kosher. That's one version. Another version we had here before in the Gemara was that a person gives a get and he says chutz. He's not making a condition. He's doing even something stronger than that. He's saying, I'm leaving over some of the isser. For that person, you're still asr. So according to that version, Rabbi Eliezer still says the get is kosher. And the Chachamim say the get is possible. Those were the two explanations for the machlekes we had before in the beginning of the Pedic. So now the Gemara continues here with a few shilas that Abaya asked regarding this halacha. Boy Abaya, so Abaya asked the following shaila. Omalo, he tells his wife, Hareya muteres l'chol adam. You mutter to get married to everyone. Chutz mi Reuven v'Shimon. Besides Reuven and Shimon. So now in this case he said chutz besides. So this is obviously the machlekes of the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer whether the get takes effect. According to Chachamim it cannot, and Rabbi Eliezer says it does. But then afterwards v'chazav v'amala, he came back to her and told her l'Reuven v'Shimon that you mutter for Reuven and Shimon. So mahu, how do we understand when he came back and said you mutter to Reuven and Shimon? Mi amrinon, do we say what he meant to say is my da'asar, this that he said before chutz that you asar to them shara. Now he said that he's mutter to them as well. So therefore now he's giving her a get and he's saying that she's mutter to everyone. So therefore the gedushin should take effect even according to the Chachamim. Or maybe the way we understand what he was saying now is when he came back, my da'asar shara. Reuven and Shimon that he said before that she should still be asar to, now he's telling her that she's mutter to Reuven and Shimon. But umay de shara asar. When he said before that to the entire world she should be mutter, that he's now telling her that no, you're going to be asar to the entire world, and the only one that you're going to be mutter to is Reuven and Shimon. Right? When he comes back and says l'Reuven v'Shimon, he's telling you you're divorced and you mutter only to Reuven and Shimon. That's one case where this shaila plays out. Now, if you're going to say that with this language, when he comes and says l'Reuven v'Shimon, my da'asar shara, that this Reuven and Shimon that he left over and the Issaran, so now he's coming and being mata even that, so now she becomes completely mutter and the get takes effect. But what's if he came back and told her l'Reuven mahu? Originally he said that she should still be asa to Reuven and Shimon, and he came back and said to Reuven you're allowed. What did he mean by saying the word Reuven? Just Reuven. Do we say what he meant to say is l'Reuven, that now you'll be mutter to Reuven v'hu adin l'Shimon? He meant to say that I'm taking off what I said before chutz, and you're going to be mutter to Reuven and to Shimon. The reason why he only mentioned Reuven, mishum de pasach bei, because that's the first of the two people that he began with. So he didn't specify. He didn't say Reuven and Shimon, but he meant to say that what I said before that you would be aser. So now you're going to be mutter to Reuven and to Shimon. Or maybe we could say no, Reuven dafke. Before he said that she should be still aser to Reuven and Shimon, and now he's coming back and being matter her to Reuven, but the Isra and Shimon still remains. So according to the Chachamim, this will not be a gedushin. Another further, Gemara asks, if you'll say in this case, Reuven dafke, when he says Reuven, he means to be matter her only to Reuven, but not to Shimon. How about if he came and told her l'Shimon mahu? He came and said, after he said previously that he's still answering her to Reuven and Shimon, he comes back and tells her that you mutter to Shimon. Mahu, what does he mean by this? Do I say l'Shimon v'hu adin l'Reuven? Does this mean that she's going to be aser? Again, l'Shimon, does he mean to say that she's going to be mutter to Shimon? And v'hu adin l'Reuven, he meant to say you're going to be mutter to Shimon and to Reuven. Shimon, the reason why he mentioned only Shimon and not Reuven, mishum de salik minei. The reason is because that's the last one that he mentioned, so he's coming back and taking off from the last name that he had mentioned. But really he means to say, both of those people that I mentioned to you that you were asa to, now I'm taking it off, you'll be mutter. Or no, if he only mentioned Shimon by name, so he means to say that I'm taking off the Isser from Shimon, but the Isser to Reuven still remains, so she won't be divorced. Further, the last shaila here that Rav Ashi asks, based on this last shaila here, Boy Rav Ashi asks, if we're going to say that he comes back, if he told again, Rav Ashi is talking about the case that we started with. In the beginning he said Chutz mi Reuven v'Shimon, and then he comes back and tells her Af l'Shimon. He adds the word Af and says also to Shimon. What did he mean to say when he said Af l'Shimon? Now the shaila of Rav Ashi is, if we're going to say when he said just Shimon, so then he meant only Shimon, and he's not being mater Reuven. But what if he added the word Af l'Shimon? That you should also be mutter to Shimon. What is the meaning of that word Af? Mahu. Do I say Af a Reuven koi? The reason he's adding the word Af is because he means to say that before I asked you on Reuven and Shimon, and now I'm being mat to you not only to Shimon, but also to Shimon, meaning Reuven and Shimon, both people that I said before you aser, now I'm telling you that you're mutter. So the Gerushin will be good. Oidilme Af a almakoi, or the term Af does not mean the two people that I mentioned before, Reuven and Shimon, but Af just means that besides the entire world that you're mutter to, you're also going to be mutter to Shimon, but the Issa to Reuven still remains. That he never removed. So if according to Chachamim, there won't be any Gerushin here. So Tekel, the Shaila remains unresolved. The Rambam's klal is, anytime the Gemara uses a term im tim tzeloimer, when you have something like this, a bunch of ibayas that come one after the next, we always paskin like that, im tim tzeloimar. But over here, this ibaya in the end, where the Gemara says teku, that is unresolved. So this is going to be a Safek Gerushin. Okay, now here the Gemara returns to focus on the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, which is a very chiddushdige opinion, that a person could divorce his wife, and he could tell her, I'm divorcing you, and you mutter to the whole world, besides so, and the Gerushin still takes effect, even though he's not completely divorcing her. This is issue that still remains for somebody. So Tana Rabbanu, we learned a brayso about this. La'acha pitirasa shel Rabbi Eliezer. After Rabbi Eliezer passed away, nichnesu arba zekenim lahashav al dvarav. So there were 4 elders that entered, and they discussed Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, and they came to bring proofs against his opinion. Who were they? Eluhain, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Tarfin, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva. And the Brayso will bring the questions or the rayas that each one asked on Rabbi Eliezer. And then Rabbi Tarfin said the following, that I'll prove to you that Rabbi Eliezer's halacha is not true. Because Harei Shahal Chazu, here, this woman, that this person, the husband said to her, you mutter to the whole world, besides Reuven. Now this woman went, and she went and she got married to the brother of Reuven, Shanesra. That's the person that she's still usher to. And now her husband dies without any children. So what happens? Usually there would be a mitzvah of yibum. But the husband that had previously divorced her had told her that the whole divorce is not to everybody. This Reuven you still usher to. So now Reuven can't do the mitzvah of yibum, because she's still usher to him. So doesn't it come out that this husband that's divorcing his wife, he's uprooting something minatayre? Because now she can't have the mitzvah of yibum from this man that the husband originally had said when he divorced her that yaset him. So from this, the way it would play out in this scenario, this teaches you she'ein zeh krisis, that this is not the krisis that the Torah meant. Krisis cannot be in such a way that it causes later that a din of the Torah, which is yibum, gets uprooted. That was the raya of Rab Tarfin. Okay, the Gemara will discuss all of these rayas that it brings now. The Gemara will discuss it in detail. We'll see. We'll see. Everything will be discussed later in the Gemara here. Now Rabbi Yossi Aglili got up and he said, I have the following raya against Rabbi Eliezer. Heichon Matzino. Where do we find in the Torah Aser Lezeh that there's an Issa for one, but a Mutter Lezeh, but it's Mutter for someone else? Ha'aser, Aser Lakail. What's Aser is Aser for everyone. V'ha-Mutter, Mutter Lakail. And what's Mutter is Mutter for everyone. So over here, what's happening? This woman is not an Eishes Ish. She's getting divorced and she's Mutter to the entire world, besides for Reuven, or besides for whatever people the husband is telling her. So she's Mutter for them and Aser for them. That can't be. So therefore, this teaches you she'ein zeh krisis. This is not the krisis the Torah intended with a get. Then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah got up and he said, krisis, when the Torah says that you have to give a sefer krisis, what does that mean? Dava hakodesh beinoi lebeino. It has to be something that completely severs the connection of the husband and wife. Over here, saying that the Isser of Eishes Ish for someone is still in effect, that means that there's no proper krisis. And that's not what the Torah means when it says Sefer Krisis. This is not the Krisis the Torah spoke about. Then Rabbi Kiva, the last one here, he got up and he said that he has a raya against Rabbi Eliezer. What happens? She gets divorced with this chutz, with this case here that the husband says, you mutter to everyone, but you still usher to someone. So she goes and gets married to someone. And she had children from that person. And then, and then her husband dies, her second husband dies, or her second husband divorces her. And now, she goes ahead and she gets married to this person that the first husband, when he divorced her, told her that the whole divorce is to everyone, but you still usher to this guy. So now what happens? This person that she's usher on him. Loi nimtza get bottle. Doesn't it come out that now the get of the first husband retroactively is nullified because she broke this t'nai, or she went and she married this person that she wasn't supposed to marry. So but now mamzerim. Now the children from the second marriage are all going to end up being mamzerim. How could we allow such a thing to happen? That such a kind of a get with this kind of condition, and then if she breaks it later, so retroactively the children are mamzerim. So because Torah doesn't want such a thing to happen, so we know that this is not the krisis that the Torah intended when it said Sefer Krisis. Another pshat, another point that Rabbi Kiva said to refute Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. In this case, when the husband gave her a get and says you mutter to the whole world, besides to one person, that you still usher. The Isra of Eshes will still apply for him. So for him, you're not divorced. So Shanesral of Kayin. So this person that he said, besides for him you're not divorced. What's if that person is a Kayin? And now Umeisa Megadish, and this person that gave her this get passed away. So Loi Nimtzis, doesn't it come out that Almana Etzloi Ugrusha Etzel Kaladam? For the entire world, she's a Grusha, because before the husband died, he already had divorced her. But for this Kayin, for this one person, she's not a Grusha. For him, she's only an Almana, because the husband that said that for him, you're still an Eshes Ish. So now what's the halacha? Is she allowed to go and marry this Kayin? A Kayin, a regular Kayin, is allowed to marry an Almana, but not a Grusha. So you would think that because for him she's an Almana, she's allowed to marry this Kayin. But that's not the halacha. If she's a Grusha for everyone else, she has a name Grusha. She can't marry this Kayin. So if so, v'kal v'chaymer, we have the following kal v'chaymer. Uma Grusha, if when it comes to the Isser of marrying a Grusha, Kayin, marrying a Grusha, she kala, it's only allowed. But nevertheless, the halacha in this case would be asura, should be also to marry this man that's a kayin, even though for him she's not a grusha, for him she's just an almana. And why is she also to marry him? B'shvil tzad gerish shabbat. Because since for everyone else she's a grusha, so this is a woman that has that aspect of grusha for the whole world. So even for this kayin, she's called a grusha. So if that's so, when it comes to the Isser of Grusha to a Kayin, so Eishes Ish, Shehi Chamura, Loi Kol Shekain. So if so, for this woman as well over here, if there's a tzad of Eishes Ish still in her, you're divorcing her and you're saying that she's mutter to the whole world. But for one person, she's still an Eishes Ish. That Isser for him still applies. So if there's still an aspect of Eishes Ish in her, now the Isser of Eishes Ish is Kares, it's a much more stringent matter. Or more than that, it's a skila. It's a much more stringent matter. Like kol shekain, most definitely we should say that the divorce doesn't take effect at all. If she's still partially an Eishes Ish, she can't be mutter to anyone. So this kal v'chayim teaches you she'ein zeh krisis. This is not the krisis that the Torah intended. After all of these Tanoim said their reason why they disagree with Rabbi Eliezer, Amalei Rabbi Yeshua, so Rabbi Yeshua got up and said, we can't give answers, we can't refute Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, the lion, such a great person like Rabbi Eliezer, after he passed away. As Rashi says, if he would have been here, he maybe would have given an answer to all these questions. Amar Rava said about this Braisa here, Kulu Islu Pirche, all of these rayas against Rabbi Eliezer could all be refuted. Levar mit Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Besides what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, that's the only one that can't be refuted. The Lesle Pirche. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned this in a Braisa as well. The Gemara will explain now. The Gemara will go through all the details here, how they all could be refuted. So Tanya Nami.
Same thing.
Again, what?
The points everybody's the same.
They're coming to the same conclusion, but they have different rayas. Tanya Nami Yachi, we learned this in the Braisa as well. Amar Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi said, Roya ani is divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah b'divrei kulan. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, what he said to refute Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, I see his refutation was right, more than all the other ones. Okay, so now here the Gemara is going to go through all the details. Amar, so the Braisa said before, Nen Rab Tarfon got up and said, here, this woman that her husband divorced her, and he said, but you can't get married to one person. And now she went, she married the brother of that person. That she's also to marry him. And now her husband passed away without children. So now there's no mitzvah of Yibum that could be fulfilled. She's also to marry him. Doesn't it come out that the first husband that divorced her, didn't he uproot this mitzvah of Yibum and Atayre? That was the language of the Braisa. So the Gemara asks on this, what kind of a raya is this? Oiker, you're saying that he, the first husband that gave her the get and asked her, he's directly uprooting? Oiker is mashma that he's mamish biyadayim going directly and uprooting. He's not uprooting it. It comes out, it causes this to happen if she'll marry the brother of that person, but he's not doing this. Is it him that was oiker it? Ella, so the Gemara says you have to read the words of Rab Tarfon differently. Masne, he makes a condition with her. He makes this condition that she should be asa to marry one person, lakar davim and atayre, which uproots this mitzvah of yibum, this davim and atayre, if she marries the brother of that person. But again, the Gemara asks if you're going to read it this way as well. It's not understood. Masne, the first husband that divorced her, he's making this condition. Mika amala is part of what he told her when he divorced her. Lisagila duloi minsvela dahu gavra. That part of the condition is that you must marry the brother of this person that I'm saying is still asa to you. That wasn't part of what he said. No one's forcing her to get married to the brother of that person. So you can't say that the husband that gave her the get is the cause for the fact that we're being oiker the mitzvah of yibum. She chose it. She chose to marry the brother of that person. Ella, the way we have to read what it says in the Braisa is Gittin laker davam and atayre. By giving a get in this kind of a way, you're causing to uproot this mitzvah of yibum and atayre. That if she decides to go and get married to the brother of this person, so now it's going to end up that you can't fulfill the mitzvah of yibum. It's Gittin. Says the Gemara, if that's what Rab Tarfon is asking, Gittin, elamayata, if so, there's other scenarios where it's impossible to fulfill the mitzvah of yibum. If so, bas achiv lo yisa, shouldn't we say that a person's not allowed to marry his brother's daughter, a niece? A niece is someone that you're allowed to marry. Not only you're allowed to marry, the Gemara says it's a mitzvah to marry a niece. So, but now you should argue and say that you shouldn't be allowed to marry a niece. Why? Because what happens? Shema yom is b'lei banim. What happens now if you die without any children, and now your brother has to do the mitzvah of yibum, but he can't? The wife is his daughter. And it's a erva. There's no mitzvah of yibum by erva. V'nimtza gaidim lakadav min atayra. By marrying your niece, you're causing that if you die without children, so now you can't do the mitzvah of yibum. So aren't you also being oikadav min atayra? And nevertheless, that's not an issue. If it ends up happening this way, so over here, there's no mitzvah of yibum. So the same thing over here, the fact that the first husband gave a get and he said one person is asa, and she marries the brother of that person, so over here, there's no mitzvah of yibum. There's no issue with this. So the Gemara says, you're right, this is a very good question on what Rab Tarfon said, and Hainu Pirche. This is the refutation to what Rab Tarfon said. As the Gemara said before, Rav said that all of these questions that they asked on Rabbi Eliezer can be refuted. So therefore here, this is the refutation to what Rab Tarfon said. Now the Gemara will discuss another point here regarding what Rab Tarfon said, and this goes back to the point that I mentioned in the beginning, that when it came to Rab Tarfon's opinion, there are two versions how to understand what Rab Tarfon said. Did Rab Tarfon speak about a case where a husband gives his wife a get and he tells her you're mutter to the whole world, and he made a t'nai. He said al menas, on the condition that you don't marry so and so. That's one way how to understand that's where Rabbi Eliezer says that she's divorced. Or another version is he didn't just make stam t'nai. He left over some of the isra of Eishes. He tells her you're mutter to the whole world chutz, besides one person. Not just stam t'nai, but he said chutz. So now the Gemara wants to understand Rab Tarfon that was refuting Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. What was how did Rabbi Tarfon understand Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? Ubemai, what is the case over here? If the case over here is that the husband that said to her, I'm divorcing you to earn your mutter to the whole world, besides the so-and-so that you're going to be yasser. But that can't be, because if so, Mishre Shara Rabbi Lazar. In this case that Rab Tarfon brought up, when after the get of the first husband, she went and married a second husband, now Rabbi Eliezer will agree that once she marries a second person, she becomes mutter to everybody, including to that person that the first husband asked her. As the Gemara brings here a brayso that says this clearly. The Tanya will learn in a brayso. Moed Rabbi Eliezer will agree. When a person divorces his wife, you mutter to everyone besides that person. So Rabbi Eliezer says the get takes effect, and you will be asa to that person. But now if she goes and marries someone else, and now and and she becomes an almana, or she gets divorced from the second marriage, so now this chutz that the first husband says doesn't apply anymore. She becomes mutter to everybody. As Rashi here says, once she gets married to a second husband, whatever issues, whatever marriage or remnants of marriage there is from the first husband is gone. Now, her status of whether she's an Eishes Ish or not depends on the second marriage. And therefore, now she'll be mutter even to that individual that the first husband had said that she's Aser. So what was the case that Rab Tarfon was talking about? Rab Tarfon was talking about over here when she went and got married to another person, to the brother of that person that Asered her. And Rab Tarfon was saying, according to Rabbi Eliezer, there'll be a problem that she can't now do the mitzvah of Yibum. But why not? Once she's married to someone else, whatever chutz the first husband says does not apply anymore. Ella says the Gemara, Ba'al Menas. Rab Tarfon understood Rabbi Eliezer was speaking about not a case where there was a chutz. If there was a chutz means you're leaving over certain issues of the first marriage. Once there's a second marriage, that chutz doesn't apply anymore. Rather, he understood Rabbi Eliezer's opinion regarding when he said, you're going to be mutter to the whole world, and he made a condition. Al menas, that you don't marry so-and-so. Now that condition always remains in effect. That condition does not change if she marries someone else. It's a condition. Condition doesn't go anywhere just because she married someone else. And that's why Rab Tarfon had the whole question that it's going to come out that there would be no mitzvah of Yibum. Again?
Amanas is not a condition.
Amanas is a condition.
No.
Chutz is not a condition. Chutz is you leaving over certain issues. That is not left over once you marry someone else. But almanas shaloi tinasi plini, if you make a condition, that doesn't change when you marry someone else. That condition is still in effect.
Chutz is like a condition.
No, the Gemara before explained on the paybags. The Gemara explained that chutz is leaving over some of the issues of the first marriage. Okay, now we go to the second Tana here. Rabbi Yossi, he asked the question of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yossi, and then Rabbi Yossi Glili Vama. What did Rabbi Yossi Glili say? Where do we find such a thing that it's asa to one and mutter to another? If it's asa to everyone. If it's mutter to everyone. So how can you say that she's now not an Eishes Ish, but she still is an Eishes Ish for someone? What kind of a question is this? You don't find such a thing. So trume and kachim shasur lezeh. It's asur for one person. It's asur for anyone that's not a kayin. Umiteres lezeh, and it's mutter for the kayin. So here you have an isur that's only for one and not for another. Answers the Gemara, be'isur isha kamrinan. Rabbi Yossi Glili meant to say that you don't find such a thing regarding the isur of a isha, of a woman. It should be asur to one and mutter to another. The Gemara, but of course by Aisha you find this as well. V'harei arayis be'ishus v'harei arayis. All these surim of arayis, all the different kinds of relatives. It's a relative to one and it's not a relative to another. So it's mutter to one and asa to another. So you find it by ishus as well. Says the Gemara, be'ishus kamrina. We don't mean all arayis. For sure by all arayis, the whole concept of an erv is a relative, so it's a relative to one and mutter to the other. But it means over here the isser of Eishes Ish, that it should be an Eishes Ish for one and not an Eishes Ish for another. Where do you find such a thing? Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Hare Eishes Ish, the whole concept of an Eishes Ish, what's an Eishes Ish? She's married to one person, for her husband it's mutter, and for someone else it's asa. Every single marriage is that way. That it's mutter for one and asa for another. So what's this question of Rabbi Yossi Glili? Says the Gemara, Hainu Perchet. Yeah, this is the refutation for what Rabbi Yossi Glili said. So apparently Rabbi Yossi Glili had a svara to say, of course when it comes to marriage, she's mutter to the husband and asa to everyone else. We're going to make that division. But to everyone else, the entire world, she's asa. Rabbi Yossi Glili said he couldn't understand what this means, that besides being married to a husband, to people of the entire world that she's not married to, you're going to say that to him she's still asa and to him she's mutter. But the Gemara says it's not a good question of what Rabbi Eliezer says, because you see by ishus that she could be mutter to the husband, and as a result of that she could be mutter to some people in the world, and she could be asa to others. So now again the Gemara analyzes here, how did Rabbi Yossi Glili understand Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? Was Rabbi Eliezer talking about a case where the husband had given the get and said chutz, Or did he give the get and he made a condition, al manas, that you won't marry so and so? Ubemai, how did Rabbi Yosef clearly understand Rabbi Eliezer? Ilaim bebal manas, did he understand that Rabbi Eliezer was speaking about a case where he made a condition? And what was the condition? So as Rashi clarifies, when you make a condition, the condition is al manas shaloi tinosi leploni. The condition is that you won't marry, only marriage, like proper marriage. You're not going to marry so and so. That was the condition. But if so, harei hutra etzlei biznus. So then, what that means is the condition was only not to marry. But he didn't, the husband, when he divorced, it didn't say anything about stam having a relation with her without marriage. Znus, that he didn't say anything about. So if so, it comes out that really this woman that gets divorced here is mutter to the entire world, including for this person. It's only specifically marriage that the condition was, that she shouldn't marry him. Ela b'chutz. So Rabbi Yosef that was asking the question, Rabbi Eliezer, he understood that Rabbi Eliezer is speaking about a case of chutz, where the husband is saying you're going to be mutter to the whole world, but for so and so the ishus is still left over, and therefore for him you're still an ishus ish, and you may not have any relation with him whatsoever. And that was his question on Rabbi Yosef, on Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, we go to the next question that the Braisa brought. And then Rabbi Akiva, or actually the Gemara here skips Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, but the Gemara goes to Rabbi Akiva. What did Rabbi Akiva say? V'omar. What happens if she would go and get married to someone else after this kind of divorce, where there was the divorce that Rabbi Eliezer was speaking about, that she can't get married to someone, and she goes and gets married to someone else? Now, she had children from the second marriage. Now she either becomes a almana or divorced. And now she goes and marries this individual that the first husband told her not to marry. So Nimtza get bottled, doesn't it come out that now the first get is retroactively nullified? And the children from the second marriage now will turn out to be mamzerim. So the Torah for sure doesn't want such a kind of a thing. So this is not the krisis that the Torah spoke about. That was Rabbi Akiva's raya. So the Gemara asks him this: if this is your problem, any condition that a husband makes with a wife when he gives her a get, Nami, so we should have the same problem. Leit tinsiv. She should not, after she gets the get, even though she's already divorced, but she should not be allowed to go and get married to anyone, because what happens if, in the end, she doesn't fulfill her condition, and the nimsa get bottle, and now retroactively the get is nullified, the children will be mamzayim. This is not a problem specifically here with what Rabbi Eliezer is speaking about, this tnai, when he says a tnai that you're not allowed to marry this and this individual. Any tnai is a problem that later she may not fulfill it. So the Gemara says, you're right, Hainu Pircha. This is the refutation on what Rabbi Akiva said, that this is not a good question on Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So there's a discussion in Rishonim about this. This is a very, very fundamental point here regarding any tnai that you have by a get. When you make a tnai for a get, and the get takes effect, what's the halacha? Is she allowed to go and get married right away? And we're going to rely on the fact that the tnai will be fulfilled? Or no, we have to wait to be sure that the tnai is fulfilled, and only then could she go and get married. So generally, the halacha is that when you make a tnai with a get, even though the get takes effect right away, but because we don't know if the tnai is going to be fulfilled later or not, she has to wait until the tnai is fulfilled, and then she can go and get married. But it depends what kind of tnai. There are different halachas about this.
If she's not doing it tnai, she can't marry.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now again the Gemara says, how did Rabbi Akiva understand Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? What was he speaking about? Was he speaking about a condition? When the husband said, when he divorced her, Almanas Shalei Tinasi Leplani, or was he speaking about a case where he said chutz, where he was leaving over some of the issues?
But when she gets married, the new husband doesn't know if she did it or not.
And a chanami, true. Yeah, the new husband has no way of knowing. Exactly. So you'd have to wait. So what are we talking about over here? If it is the case over here that the first husband, when he divorced her, he told her you divorced for everyone, but he left over some of the issues and said for him you still lost her. So if so, once she gets married to a second husband, mishra shara, even Rabbi Eliezer that is. Rabbi Eliezer will agree that once she gets married to a second husband, now she becomes totally mutter to marry that individual. If her second husband dies, the first leftover issues from the first husband is not left over anymore. As the Braisa we brought before, the Tanya, Maida Haya Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer agreed. He divorces her and tells her, so he said chutz. The first husband left over some issues here. But now she got married to someone else. And she either became an almana or a grusha from the second husband. Now that individual that the first husband asked her is not an isra anymore. That first ishus is gone. Now we define her status of whether she's an Eishes Ish or not based on the second marriage. And even Rabbi Eliezer will agree that she'll be totally mutter. So what was the problem of Rabbi Akiva, that it may turn out to be now that the children will be mamzeirim if she marries this guy. But now that issue doesn't apply anymore. Elo ba'al menas. So we must say that Rabbi Akiva understood Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. He was speaking about a condition, and that condition remains in effect even now. And that was his problem. If that condition remains in effect even now, if she doesn't fulfill the condition and she marries him, it may be a problem for the children that will become mamzeirim.
What he meant by saying Ella Plainus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's the Gemara before in Daf Pei Beis brought two versions about it. What it means. Yeah. Dava acher. Now another thing that Rabbi Akiva said in the Braisa to disprove Rabbi Eliezer. If this individual that the husband said that you can't marry him, and that person was a kain, and now Mesa Megadish, the one that the husband that divorced her, passed away. So lenimtzis, doesn't it come out that almana, it's like for that one person, that kain, for him she's an almana, because for him the gedishin was never a gedishin. It was chutz from him. Or grusha, it's l'kol, and she's considered to be a grusha for everyone else in the world. And now what's the halacha there? She still can't marry this kayin. Why? Because she has a status of a grusha for everyone else. So if so, we have a kavachaymer. Uma grusha shehi kala. If when it comes to the isser of a kayin, marrying a grusha which is a lighter isser, asura mishum tzad gerishin shaba, she won't be allowed to marry this individual, this kayin, because of that aspect of gerishin that's in her. Eishes ish chamura, the isser of eishes ish, it's much more severe. Like Kol Shekei, most definitely you can't say that she's still an Eishes Ish for one, but for someone else she's mutter. If there's an aspect of Eishes Ish that's left over in her that's still Aser, so for sure she should be Aser for everyone else in the world still. So there's no krisis here. That was the Raya of Rabbi Akiva. So here the Gemara explains how, in this version, if this Dava Ache here, how did Rabbi Akiva understand Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? Ubamai, what was Rabbi Eliezer talking about? Ileme Ba'al Menas, was Rabbi Eliezer talking about a case where the husband just said a condition, and again, if the case is almanas, that was only almanas that you don't marry so and so. You're having a relation with that individual is not an issue. That's not an exclusion in the Gedishin, but it's just not to marry him. If so, says the Gemara, hare grusha etzlei biznos. If so, even for this individual, she is considered to be totally a grusha. What was the Kavachayim here? The Kavachayim was saying that for this Kayin, which is the person that the husband said, you're still also to, for him she's not a Grusha. She's just a Grusha for everyone else. That was the premise of the whole Kavachayim here. But if you're going to say the case over here is that he just made a condition, you're not allowed to marry him, it's specifically to marry him. That's what the condition was. Otherwise, even for this Kayin itself, she is considered to be a Grusha. There's no stam to have a relation with him, she's mutter and she's considered to be a Grusha. So there's no Kavachayim here, B'chlal. So Ella b'chutz. So here in this version, in this Dava Acher, Rabbi Akiva understood Rabbi Eliezer that he divorced her and said that you divorced for everyone, chutz for this person that you're still an Eishes Ish. So for him, she's not a Grusha. And that was the premise of the whole Kavachayim of Rabbi Akiva, that if there's an aspect of Grusha for others, she's going to be Asar on this Kayin, even though for him, she's totally not a Grusha. For sure, we should say the same thing, but negate to the Isser of Eishes Ish. Okay, so now here the Gemara concludes this whole hesbed of the Braisa and says, according to Rabbi Akiva, it comes out, we had 2 points that Rabbi Akiva said to refute Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Now, with Rabbi Akiva, the 2 points Rabbi Akiva said, did he understand that Rabbi Eliezer's opinion was regarding a case where the husband said, chutz, I'm divorcing you, but chutz, besides, for one person you're still an Eishes Ish. So leis of chutz, let him ask on Rabbi Eliezer's opinion in that scenario. If he understood what Rabbi Eliezer said was in a case where there was a condition. The condition was almanas that you don't marry so and so. So leis of almanas, you should ask a question, Rabbi Eliezer, on this scenario of almanas, because as the Gemara just proved, the 2 questions that Rabbi Akiva asked on Rabbi Eliezer, the first question could only be a question if he understands Rabbi Eliezer being almanas, and the second question is only a question if he understands Rabbi Eliezer being chutz. So how did he understand? How did he hear what Rabbi Eliezer said? So the Gemara says, the answer is Rabbi Akiva Shmielei the Iked Amachotz. Rabbi Akiva heard about what Rabbi Eliezer's opinion was, that there were those that said, repeated, Rabbi Eliezer said it in a case of chutz. Ve'iked Alma Almanas. And there were those that repeated what Rabbi Eliezer said, that he spoke about a case of Almanas. So mando malchutz hai pirche. So according to the opinion that I repeated what Rabbi Eliezer says, that he's in a case of chutz, so that was the second refutation Rabbi Kiva said in the Braisa. Mando malmanas hai pirche. And then if what Rabbi Eliezer said was in a case of almanas, we had the first refutation. So he said two pirches on Rabbi Eliezer for each version. Now the Gemara concludes, Umay pirche. What is the refutation of the second question that Rabbi Kiva asked on Rabbi Eliezer? Right, regarding this case, he brought the Kal V'Chaim from the Isser of Grusha. That by Grusha, if there's any aspect of Grusha, so she'll be also to the Kayin. So too by Eishus Ish. If there's any aspect of Ishus left over, then she can't get married to anybody. What's the refutation to that? So the Gemara says, if you're going to say, Isser Kohuna Shani, if you're going to say it's not a good Kal V'Chaim, because we can't learn out from Isser Kohuna. By Isser Kohuna, we over there, we see that the Torah is asers by kohuna when there's any aspect of gedushin in it. Automatically she becomes asa because she already has a status of grusha. So we had before a concept of even reyach haget, even if there's some kind of a smell of a get that already asks a grusha. So maybe you can't learn out for the inyan of Eishus Ish B'chlal from there. Is that the refutation on what Rabbi Kiva said? But that can't be because Rabbi Eliezer nami me'isa kohuna kamaisile. The Gemara before on Daf Pei Beis, according to one opinion, says that the source of Rabbi Eliezer's opinion itself comes from a pasuk that it says by the Isser of a grusha to a kain. The pasuk the Gemara brought before towards the beginning of Pei Beis and Beis was the isha grusha me isha lo yukachu, that if she's divorced only from her husband, and even though she's not mutter to the whole world, a kain can't marry you. So the whole source of this inyan, Rabbi Eliezer says that you could compare the Isser of Eishus Ish and learn it out from the Isser of Kohana. So you can't say that this is the refutation here. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Kiva did not hold to that source. Rave Rabbi Yanai mishum zoken echad kamasni. Rave that said that there's a refutation to all of these questions that these Tanoim asked in Rabbi Eliezer, including this refutation of Rabbi Kiva here. Rava was following the other source that the Gemara brought before from Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai said, we learn it out from the Yotzim Beis of Al Chavaisa Leish Acher, that even if she's divorced in a way that she could only marry one man, he says you only mutter to him and you ask it to everyone else, the gerushin still takes effect. That has nothing to do with the halach of grusha by a kain. So therefore, the refutation to Rabbi Kiva's raya is you can't learn out from the din of grusha by a kain to the isser of ishus that there is b'chlal. Okay, the Gemara now continues to with what it said before in the Braisa. Amalen Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua stood up and said, "Ei mishivin usari lachamisa." You can't ask questions on the lion on Rabbi Eliezer after he passed away. Says the Gemara, Lemeimre, shall we say that Rabbi Yeshua kavasei svirelei? If Rabbi Yeshua is getting up and defending Rabbi Eliezer, that he agrees to Rabbi Eliezer. But va'iyunami mifrach kaparech. Rabbi Yeshua himself also refuted Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, and the Gemara will soon bring the Braisa where what Rabbi Yeshua's refutation was. So the Gemara says, Hachikam Alahu. This is what Rabbi Yeshua was saying to all the Tanaim. Lididi nami isli pirche. I also have a question on Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. But mio, however, bein lididi, bein lididchu, whether my question, whether all of your questions, aim shivin usari lachamisa. Still, you shouldn't be asking a question on this lion after he passed away. Now, my pirche de Rabbi Yeshua. What was the question that Rabbi Yeshua asked on Rabbi Eliezer? So the time you learned in the Braisa, some Rabbi Yeshua said that we learn out from the pasuk in the Torah when it says the pasuk of a get. How does the pasuk there begin? Ki yikach ish isha. So it starts off talking about marriage, and then later on it says and then it says v'yatsa, she leaves his home, and v'hoisa leish acher, and she gets married to someone else. So the pasuk begins talking about a first marriage, ki yikach, and it finishes off talking about a second marriage after she got divorced. So Rabbi Yeshua says we have to compare the first marriage, the second marriage to the first marriage. Makish koidmei havaya shniya. We have to compare the status of this woman before her second marriage, lekoidmei havaya rishayna, to her status before the first marriage. Ma koidmei havaya rishayna, just like before the first marriage. She's not tied to anybody in the world. She's totally single. So too after a divorce, and she's getting remarried or she's getting married to someone else, the divorce only takes effect if she's not tied to anyone else. And this is the proof that you can't say that the first husband could divorce her in such a way that she's still asa to someone. That he could say that no, you're going to be mutter to them and asa to them. No such a thing. Now the Gemara goes back to another point that was mentioned before, that there is a case that Rabbi Eliezer will agree that Isser, that the husband said, chutz, will not be in effect anymore. So Nagufa, one of the points we said before was, Rabbi Eliezer will agree. A person divorced his wife and he told her, you mutter to the whole world besides so and so. Now, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that the Gedushin takes effect and she's usher to that person. But Rabbi Eliezer will agree that if now she went and got married to someone else, and now she became an almana or a grush from the second marriage, so now we say that the second marriage is now how we define her status of Eshes Ish. What the first husband defined, the second marriage takes that off, and now she becomes mutter to everybody. That's what Rabbi Eliezer agrees. Okay, so now the Gemara brings that this itself, that Rabbi Eliezer agrees in this case, there was a question that was asked in him. Hey, should Rab Shimon bar Elazar asked in Rabbi Eliezer, he asked Rabbi Eliezer, why is he agreeing in this case? Hey, where do we find such a thing? Shezeh Oyser, one husband, one individual brings about an Isser upon her, and Vizeh Mater, and it's the second husband that creates a Heter. The first husband said that Chutz, you're still an Eshes Ish to me for that person. And now because she gets married to a second person, we say that the second marriage changes the whole status here, and now we define her status of being an Eshes Ish based on the second husband. So it comes out that the second husband is being Mater Isser of the Ishus of the first husband. How could a second husband undo the Isser of Ishus of the first husband? That was Rab Shimon bar Elazar's question. So the Gemara asks on this, for law, you don't find such a thing that a source of the Isser could come from one place and then someone else could be Mater that? How does it work every time by a Yavama? The Baal Oysa, what's the source of the Isser of Yavama? If the first husband dies without any children, and now she's not allowed to marry anybody, she has to do the mitzvah of Yibam. What's the source of that Isser? So now the Gemara understands the sources of the first husband. Because the first husband was married to her, and now he died without children, so she's usher to marry anybody. Now who's going to be mater her? The first husband is not here anymore. The Yavam mater. The Yavam does chalitza for her, and now the Yavam is mater her. So here we see that the source of the Issa came from the first husband, and the Yavam is mater. Says the Gemara, no, that's not how you have to understand that. Hasam Yavam huka asar la. Over there, it's actually the Yavam himself which is the source of her Issa. It's the fact that there's a brother here, this Yavam that has the mitzvah of Yibum, he's the source of the Issa. The Imi Baal, if you're going to say it's the first husband which is the source of the Issa, that's not true. Hashari Yevakaim, as far as the first husband is concerned, she's totally mutter. Because the first husband passed away, so as far as he's concerned, if there would have been children here, or if there wouldn't have even been a brother, so then she would have been totally mutter. It's the second brother, it's the Yavam which is the source of the Issa, and he's the one that's matter with Chalitza. So we don't have, so again, the question of Rab Shimon bar Elazar remains. Where do we see such a thing that one asers and the other is the one that is matter? Okay? So the Gemara says, no, but there's another case, Harei Nedarim. What's with the case of Nedarim? The Neder Eiser, the one that makes a neder, he makes a neder, he takes upon an Isra on himself. Now who can be matter that? The Chacham matter. Someone else, a Chacham comes and is matter this for you. So I see that you create the Isser, and the Torah gives power to someone else to remove that. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the way it works. So Amar Rabbi Yechanan said, Ein Chacham matter klum. The Chacham has no power independently to be matter your Isser, your neder. Ela b'charata. You have to have a charata from the person himself, meaning he has to have a pesach to his neder. He has to show, if I would have known that this and this would have happened, I would have never made the neder. So the source of the het is coming from the person himself that made the neder. Fragt the Gemara, but how about Harei Afaras Habal? When the husband nullifies the vows of a wife, the Isha. Again, the Isha Nederes, it's the wife that makes the Neder. Ubal Mefer. And still the husband, someone else, could come and remove that Issa from her. So the Gemara says over there as well, it works for a different reason. Hasam Rav Pinchas Mishmei Rava. Like Rav Pinchas said in the name of Rava, Dom Rav Pinchas Mishmei Rava, Kol Nederes, a wife that makes a Neder, Aldaz Baila Hinederes. She makes the neder with the knowledge of that if my husband agrees, the neder should be a neder. If my husband does not agree, it should not be a neder. So it's like a condition. So therefore, the husband could nullify this. Okay, now finally the Gemara brings what we mentioned before in the Braise, how Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah refuted Rabbi Eliezer's opinion about giving a get and not completely disconnecting her by saying that you're still going to be usher to so-and-so. Then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah got up and he said, Krisus. The Torah says the term Krisus. Dava kairis beinai lebeina. Krisis means that you have to be completely disconnected from your husband. So halamad toshen is a krisis. Giving a get to your wife and saying that there's still a leftover of the issues and you're still usher to so and so, that's not a krisis. Says the Gemara Rabbanon, all the other Tanaim there that didn't bring this refutation of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, how do they understand krisis? Why didn't they ask this question? Says the Gemara, Hi krisis my avdilei. What did the other Rabbanon learn out? What is that noise over there? It's not. Okay. I'll just leave it. Hi krisis my avdilei. This krisos. What do they learn out from it? Why don't they learn out over here this refutation of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Says the Gemara, so this is, they learn out from this something else, which was brought earlier in the Masechta. What we learn out from the following brayse. If a person says to his wife, here, this is your get, al menashe letishti yayin, on the condition that you'll never drink wine, or al menashe letecha lebeis avicha lo'olam, on the condition that you never go to your father's house, never. This is not krisis. Why? Because for her entire lifetime, she still has a condition that connects her to her husband. There's always something she can't do because of her first husband. She's not totally severed from him. But shloishim yaim, however, if the condition was just for 30 days that she should be disconnected from him, just for that she has to fulfill this condition, that is the wine or the not to go to the father's house for 30 days, then that is a krisis. That is a krisis because it's only for that period of 30 days. Not more than 30 days, so therefore she is disconnected from him. Okay, so what's the point over here? Basically what the Gemara is saying is, when you make a condition which is tying her down forever to her husband, that all the Chachamim held, that's for sure not a krisis. But that's not a question on what Rabbi Elazar, on the shit of Rabbi Eliezer that is. Rabbi Eliezer said, you're making a condition, or you're giving a get, and you're saying, chutz from that person you can't marry. What happens if that person dies? So now it's not forever. Now you're going to be totally disconnected from your husband. So therefore, they held that the question from krisis is not a question. V'idach, but Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, mikoris krisis nafka. The Torah could have said, you give a get and call it sefer koris. Instead of called it sefer krisus. What's the term krisus? Krisus is an extra lush and an extra tough. You learn out both points. And even this point as well, when he says, chutz from that person that you're not divorced from, it's not going to be a get either. V'idach, the others, however, held koris krisis le'darshe. They don't darshan this koris krisis. Omar Rava said, Hareze Gittin, going back to this case, if you give your wife a get and you say, Al manash letishti yayin kol yemei chayai, on the condition that you won't drink wine my entire lifetime. So ein zeh krisis. That's not krisis. Kol yemei chayei ploini, if he tells you can't drink wine as long as so and so is alive, hareze krisis. Then it is a krisis. Now, as we said before, the point here is, as long as he makes this condition in a way that at a certain point she will be mutter to drink wine, and then she'll be totally severed from her husband, then it's fine. So the Gemara asks, if so, why, if he makes the condition that you can't drink wine as long as so and so is alive, that person could die. And then now the condition is fulfilled and she's totally severed from her husband. So if the husband says, as long as I'm alive, so Dilma Mois, maybe the husband will die before her, and now the condition is fulfilled, so retroactively she's totally divorced. So why are we saying that in such a case it's not a good Gedishin? So rather say what Rava meant to say is, if the husband tells his wife, you can't drink wine as long as you're alive, that ain't a krisis. That's not called a krisis. However, if he tells her that as long as I'm alive, or as long as so-and-so is alive, then it will be a krisis, because if he or that person dies, then she'll be able to drink wine, so then she'll be totally severed from her husband.